freezing. I don't know why it's freezing from my own end.
It looks like on my end, it's the clock is ticking, so it looks like it's okay here.
Okay, so yeah, we are live, and yeah, so I would say welcome to everyone who is joining me on this YouTube live. Thank you to everyone who is joining my guests. We're going to discuss extensively on biases. I want to introduce to you Shauna Cole. She's the founder of Career Interrupted, and she's also a university instructor with the University of New Brunswick. So for those of you who plan to go to University of New Brunswick, you'll meet Shauna Cole there. And she's a very great career strategist. So for those of you who are confused about your career and you don't know what to do, you've experienced some form of bias, Shauna Cole is the best person you should be talking to. Yes, you should be talking to Shauna Cole. After this, you check the description box of this video. You will find her details. She also has a YouTube channel. You can connect with her on LinkedIn and some other social media accounts. So I want to say, everyone, welcome. I'm seeing some people from Kuwait that have joined me. So wherever you are from, just say hello so that I can say hello to where you're joining me from. Okay, so it's only Kuwait I've seen so far. Okay, so yeah, so I would start with a story first of all. When I landed Canada, before I landed, I actually started sending some of my resumes out because I knew I was actually coming to Canada. But after having some form of discussion with some people, they were like, the roles I am looking at, they feel that I am overqualified, educationally overqualified for them, because I had a master's degree back from my home country. And I was just trying to, spread my resume all across all kinds of jobs, just to, get something that I can hold on to as far, let me get a job that I can start doing once I land, And somebody said, remove your master's degree from your resume. Don't put your master's degree in your resume, because when an employer sees your master's degree, they will think you are overqualified for that position. And I had to remove my master's degree from my resume to start searching for jobs. So do you think it's actually a good thing to remove most of your qualifications from your resume just to get a foot in the door, just to have attraction when you send your resume to an employer?
I think it's always going to depend on the nature of the position that you're applying to. I can totally appreciate the situation you were in, and maybe you weren't looking to apply for a role that was going to utilize that master's degree immediately upon entry in Canada. In that case, I feel like we do what we got to do to get the foot in the door. I'm not saying that that's right or fair. Mm-hmm. The reality is up against some bias, right? Like we're up against some bias. So in this scenario, if you were struggling to get an interview, absolutely remove it from your resume. It's something you can speak to in the interview process and highlight that experience and so on. But I think anything that is creating a barrier from you getting an interview and ultimately landing from the job, I think we should consider the possibility of just deleting that information from our resume.
Okay, so considering the fact that you're a career strategist, I know you've dealt with so many people, you've helped so many people overcome bias. What are the biases what form of biases do you think people face, like new immigrants, people trying to get a job, people trying to get their dream job? What kind of biases do you think they would face?
Yeah. Well, first of all, can I just say, I'm so happy that we're actually having this discussion and acknowledging that bias actually exists, because I find a lot of the job search advice that we get out there when it comes to the Canadian market assumes this equal playing field, When the reality is, when you're a newcomer, you're facing some really unique challenges because of your cultural background, perhaps because of your physical appearance rather, and perhaps because of your accent as well. So I can speak specifically to some clients that I had worked with. I had a Nigerian client, and those Nigerian names are really long sometimes, right?
Truth.
Yeah, right. So
even my name is very long, even from childhood. People were finding it difficult calling my name, so I had to shorten it to Wolo. And I've been having that problem since childhood. So most Nigerian names are quite long, so that's true.
Yeah. So, and I've worked with quite a few. Like, there's a lot of folks, a lot of Nigerians in the program I teach in at the university. So I meet a lot of folks from Nigeria, and sometimes they become my career clients. And I had this one client, and he had a lengthy name. His name was Adebayo, lengthy, and the name sounds not familiar, non-North American. And if you can imagine, in my market area, it's mostly like white older dudes that are making all the hiring decisions. Yeah. So this guy was having like a really hard time getting an interview. Okay. And there was no reason why. Like, he presented perfectly, his language skills were exceptional. There was no reason that I could see that would be holding him back from, he had me writing a professional resume with him. But my suspicion was based on, and it's not just my suspicion, there's a number of studies that show this as well, that it was his name. So there's data that actually supports that someone with a non-North American name is something like 2 times less likely to get an interview in North America. So in this case, the candidate actually changed his name on his resume. Now, I'm not saying that this is like the right thing, and it obviously we could debate it a few different ways. But for him, in his case, he went from not being able to get an interview to getting like 6 interviews within a week. And he even went back and applied to some of the same jobs he had applied to before, but he changed his name to Adam. And all of a sudden, he's getting more interest. Again, I'm no way advocating that this is right or that this is fair. Okay. I'm saying that this is a reality that some newcomers may face, and there are creative ways we can take to overcome those.
Okay. So apart from the name bias, which other biases do you think newcomers or people who try to get better jobs face?
I think that newcomers are up against some assumptions around their communication skills. I think that's another big one. So I think that what I've seen behind the scenes in boardrooms, managers going through, again, non-North American names, are making assumptions about your ability to communicate effectively in their organization. So I do think that that's a big one. And I would suggest that you can absolutely start to overcome some of those biases by taking simple tactics. Like, if you're a professional and you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you need to have a LinkedIn profile and upload a video of yourself speaking. If you have stellar communication skills and you suspect, this could be something that's holding me back, show the employers that you've got that skill. YouTube's another great way to do that. You don't have to have a YouTube channel to build a following or build a business, but what if you could use it to like showcase your communication skills, showcase your ability to build an effective presentation, and so on. I think there's ways to overcome it. Again, not right or fair, but definitely a reality.
Okay, so I think I'll at this point I'll also mention one bias that my husband faced when he was trying to get a job. So his name is actually an English name, and when he applied for this job, he was called for an interview. And the moment he started speaking, the interviewer was no longer interested because of his accent. He had this Nigerian Port Harcourt accent, which was interfering with his communication skills. So in this situation, what do you tell people to do? Because clearly we are coming from a background where we are used to speaking in a certain type of way mixed with our mother tongue, and this affects our communication. And every other person also comes from a different background as well. People from India, people from France, people from even Irish and Scotland, everybody has an accent, right? So how can someone overcome bias when speaking?
I think that's a reality. People from around the world are going to sound different. And I think the first thing that I would say is if someone doesn't have the patience or the desire to seek to understand what you have to say, if you're putting your best effort forward, they're probably going to suck as an employer anyways, and you probably don't want to work there. So I say just keep that top of mind. I think as newcomers, if you are working on your language skills, the most important advice that I would give anyone who has a unique accent that would be unfamiliar to someone, because I think of the city that I'm in, it's not a hugely diverse city. So if someone comes with a Nigerian accent, that's different and unique. And I might struggle legitimately to understand that as a hiring manager. So I think the best thing that you can do as newcomers is your best. You can do your best to learn the language. And I think you can also slow down. So I teach a class in effective communication, and I say over and over again in those presentations, assume I have never heard someone from your culture with your accent, and I'm unfamiliar and uncomfortable with my ability to understand you. Just make that assumption from the get-go, and watch your speed. And slow down so that you're being a little bit more accommodating and understanding of what you're kind of up against in that situation.
Okay, I think my screen is freezing here. I don't know whether anybody can see that. Or Shauna, can you see if your screen is also freezing? Mine is freezing.
Mine seems to be going okay there. I still look like I'm live.
Okay, so I want to ask, I want to put a question from the screen. I hope this freezing stops because mine is freezing from my own end. Somebody's asking if there are bias with new immigrants in Canada. What's the hope for people applying for jobs outside Canada?
Yeah, so and this would be like you're not living here, but you're planning on coming here. Is that the assumption?
Yes.
I think the most important thing that you can do as someone looking to transition to Canada is start to make some friends here, start to network here. I think that that's really the most important step that you can take. And really, with everything that we have available in terms of like LinkedIn and Facebook groups and Slack groups and all these different resources, it's not that arduous of a feat. Like we can actually do it with low cost and low barriers to entry. So I think the most important thing we can do to start to prepare ourselves for getting a job in Canada is to have contacts in Canada. Most of the jobs in this market are hidden a lot of the time anyways. So yes, there's job boards and all these things, but a lot of the times the way we get jobs in Canada is through who we know and through a referral basis. So having those contacts set up in advance, having a network in your profession in advance of coming here, I think is really, really key to your success. You can research, so you can build your network before you come to Canada. You can do all the research that you can do to get to know the field that you want to be in Canada, and learn and be informed before you arrive. But I think that network piece is key to your success on all fronts, really.
Okay, so that's a perfect that's a perfect tip there for people who are outside Canada to start networking via LinkedIn, especially the connections, because it's very difficult just throwing your resumes randomly without having a connection to someone who can push the resume. And with Canada, people are actually very, very they are very, how will I put it now? They are very concerned with the kind of people they refer, and they don't just refer people to get jobs because they want to know you, they want to know what you can do. They can't just take chances on you without knowing you. So if people can start networking on LinkedIn, so I would ask the question, how can someone network on LinkedIn, especially for people outside Canada? Maybe contacting somebody on LinkedIn to say, oh, hello, I would like to connect with you. What are the kind of messages the person should be sending if the person wants to connect to someone on LinkedIn? Because some people don't know how to put those messages across. They just, connect with people and then go straight to asking them, please, can you give me a job? Which I feel is too straightforward. You don't just connect to someone and tell the person, can you give me a job? It doesn't make any sense because the person doesn't know you from Adam, So what kind of messages should someone send across to someone who he or she is interested in connecting with?
Yeah, I love that you said, like, don't send a message looking for a job, which so many people do. And it's like, I have just met you, like, take me out to dinner before you ask me to marry you and hire you, right? Is kind of what it feels like. So I absolutely agree with that. And I would just encourage anyone who is looking to leverage LinkedIn to, first of all, make sure that they have a really complete profile, because rest assured, if you're a stranger, I'm going to click to your profile to see kind of what your deal is. So you want to look credible. You want to look like your profile's up to date before you start doing any sort of like cold outreach on LinkedIn, which I believe can be a really, really useful path for your job search. When you're doing these outreach messages on LinkedIn, the number one piece of advice that I can give to you is do not ask for anything right away. It's like a long game. And I know it's like, I want a job, but it's not going to be effective if you come out and have that discussion from the get-go. Shift your mindset and say, like, how can I help you? How can I add value, Shauna, to your network? How might I add some knowledge or insight or make you feel good about a piece of work that I consumed that you did that impacted me? So I want you to think about those sorts of approaches rather than going like straight in for an ask. The second piece of advice I would say when it comes to networking on LinkedIn is like to get to the point real quick, because some people will have this approach where they write these long, lengthy messages and nobody's reading them. If you want to connect with someone on LinkedIn who has some influence in your field, research that person before you ever reach out to them. Send them a unique pitch. So get to know them a little bit. Like, this is not mass messaging. It's like, Willow, like, you have this YouTube channel. I'd love to come on your YouTube channel, and I think I can add value to your audience by providing career advice. Like, I customize that message before I reach out and demonstrate what the value is for you. That's what you need to do when it comes to networking on LinkedIn. And then follow it up with like a clear ask. Like, you want to get to know this person and build a relationship. So just like you build a relationship at a networking event or in real life, it's probably going to start with baby steps, not like a huge ask. So I think a really great first step is to say, like, hey, do you have 15 minutes to hop on a Zoom call? I really love that blog post you wrote, the other piece of impressive work you did. I'd love to explore how I might be able to create something similar to that. So don't ask for something, bring value to the person.
Okay, so I just want to reiterate what Shauna just said. It's good to bring value to the person you're connecting with. If you have to overcome bias during your job search, you have to network first of all, and then add value to the person, and then the person will be able to like connect you to opportunities when they are available, rather than just going straight off the bat and asking for a job. From where I come from, people are very direct. They just go straight, bam, this is what I want. We are always in a hurry. We want this, we want that. And sometimes it looks aggressive, but people don't know it's a cultural thing that where we come from, this is how people behave. And somehow some people will find it like, no, this is aggressive. This is an aggressive behavior, but it's a cultural, behavior. Do you think our cultural behavior sometimes affects us and brings this bias against us? Do you think so?
For sure, because like if you took that approach on LinkedIn, for example, and like sent a message to a hiring manager that you hadn't met before saying, I need this job, that's going to be very off-putting to a Canadian hiring manager. And to your point, that's going to feel aggressive and like you're asking for something really, really big that's not suited to a relationship that doesn't exist yet. So absolutely, our cultural backgrounds and where we come from drives some of our behavior. And absolutely, some of that is going to be disconnected from what the norms are and what the standards are in the Canadian job market. So it's going to be really, really important. I actually did a video all about cross-cultural communication on my channel if you want to check that out. But it's going to be really, really important that you do research on the culture that you're going to be interacting with. And honestly, the most effective way, the number one most effective way to get to know that culture is to start to connect with and meet people from that culture and build those relationships. Then you're solving all kinds of problems. You got people who can help you find jobs. You can say, is it appropriate or not appropriate for me to send this message? You have someone to actually ask that question to. It's all about the people. It's all about connecting with people, and that's going to help you understand and start to practice and get to know those cultural norms. I think that your background and culture and experience can be off-putting because someone's expectations are different. But that's not to say that once you have that relationship built, that there's so much value and knowledge and great learnings and differences from your culture that can be a benefit here. So it's a tough balancing act because it's like you want to be yourself, but at the same time, you want to conform and get that initial job, right?
Okay, so I'll take one question from one of the audience, and he's saying, how easy is it for a qualified individual with experience working in first world countries like the UK to get a job? Do you have paid recruitment agencies?
I'd say that probably for a qualified individual coming from a first world country, that transition is going to be simpler than someone coming from a country that has vastly different living standards, education system, and cultural norms. So I think absolutely it's like if I move to America, there's not going to be in the recruitment process a strong disconnect between what I believe to be normal and what their norms are, right? And the same thing if I were to transition to the UK. There are just so many cultural similarities and less nuances. So I think first of all, you're probably going to have a simpler transition than someone transitioning from a vastly different country rather. And then yes, there are paid recruitment agencies here. So it would be pretty common for like a senior professional role to work with a recruitment agency, and that recruitment agency would have their resume on file and work to actively match them to positions. For more frontline type positions, it's really more the candidate would provide their information and resume to the recruiter, and then it would be more so the employer coming to the recruiter to fill a need and then calling the candidate on an as needed basis. It's less niche with the more frontline positions.
Okay. So I'll ask the next question. Is it legal to change your name on official documents just to avoid that bias?
Yeah, so I think a really common misconception is that a resume is some sort of like official document in Canada when it's really not. So your resume is basically your marketing document. That's all it is. So absolutely, we want to be truthful and accurately present our experience. But you need to know that a recruiter in North America is probably spending like 6 seconds scanning your resume. So we're not expecting every single last detail to be on it. With all this being said, it is very common for folks to use nicknames or a name other than their given legal name on their resume. So there's nothing illegal or shady about that. It's a very common practice. What I will say is when it comes time to employment offer, that's when you would disclose your legal name to be set up on payroll and so on and so forth.
Okay. Okay, so I'll move on to the next question. Do Canadian employers like one-page resume infused with graphic design elements?
I think that that's really going to depend on what kind of role you're applying for. So I think if you are a graphic designer and you want to stand out, totally do some beautifully designed resume document that not only, tells the employer, here's my skills in graphic design. You are literally showing them. You're literally showing them that skill set. And on the other hand, if you're applying for a more traditional, a role in a more traditional organization or government, let's say, and the position you're targeting is like an accounting type role, you might want to go with more a traditional format resume. What I will say is there's going to be no kind of right, wrong, one size fits all answer when it comes to resume formatting in Canada. What you should do is look at your field specifically and do some research around your field. And kind of to give a blanket statement, but again, there's going to be exceptions. Usually, if you're looking for a role that's like a more creative type position, so graphic designer is one, a marketing role, you can think of roles in like theater or art designer, whatever. You're probably going to have a more creative looking resume, a more designed looking resume than someone seeking out a traditional, a role with a traditional company in a field like accounting or something like that.
Okay. I'll move on to the next question. The person is asking, will it be too direct to request to connect with you from this moment?
No, come over on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm actively working to build my network over there, so that I can continue to offer knowledge and guide job seekers through challenging situations, just like you all are facing when it comes to starting a career in a new country. So connect with me over on LinkedIn, and you could also subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Okay, so you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and connect with her on LinkedIn as well. So I think that answers the question there. Okay, so the next question, how many pages is an ideal Canadian resume? I know 2 pages. I don't know if recruiters are willing to look at more than 2 pages because of the volume of resumes they receive. So maybe you are the expert, you're the career strategist, so you'll be able to tell us how many pages is ideal.
So I use like a rule of thumb. If you have under 10 years experience, try to do 1 page. And the reason I recommend that is we literally know, stats show that recruiter, you've got like the 6-second scan. So if you can have a really nicely done, succinct 1-page resume, do it. But 2 pages is always gonna be your max. I can think of a couple of exceptions if you're looking for a role in like academia, right? So if you're looking for an academic role and you have to do a complete CV or something like that, a curriculum vitae is something that lists all of your experience, whereas a resume is a marketing document. So go 2 pages max. If you have under 10 years experience, try to keep it to 1 page. If that's impossible, go for the full 2.
Okay, so I don't think there are any more questions. Please, guys, keep asking your questions. Shauna is here to answer all of your questions on how to overcome bias during job search. And if I'm going to summarize what we've talked about so far, we talked about networking, we talked about resumes, we talked about connecting to people when you're trying to network and you don't just go direct. You have to kind of build a form of relationship first of all before you can ask the questions for them to help you connect you to an employer. And we've talked about the size of resume. Should it be 2 page or 1 page? Ideally, if you have less than 10 years experience, it should be a 1 page. But if you have more than 10 years experience, 2 page. And then if you're going into academia, it should be like the full curriculum vitae. So I think that's the summary of what we talked about so far. Shauna, do you have any other thing you can add to what we've been discussing for more people to learn about how they can overcome bias?
Yeah, I think that first of all, again, be aware that a lot of the job search information out there does actually, there's like miseducation around it. It assumes that equal playing field. So I think it's so important that we do acknowledge that that bias is there. But I think more importantly than that, we acknowledge that there are like extra steps that we can take to actually beat some of those biases. So things like building that solid network, having friends and allies for us before we even arrive, and things like building out that LinkedIn profile or putting some videos on YouTube that demonstrate your skills. I think really, if you're ever in a situation where you can show me your skill rather than just tell me you have it, you see the difference between like show and tell. If you could actually show me the skill, do that. Figure out a way to show me that skill rather than for me to just have to kind of like, oh, I'll take your word for it that you're a really good designer. Show me that you are whenever you can.
Okay, that's a perfect tip there, showing the skill rather than telling the skill. I know. Okay, there's something some people usually do. They kind of pad up their skills, even if they don't have the skills. Do you think it's okay for someone to pad up his or her skills to try to get their foot in the door, try to get a recruiter to like look at their resume? Do you think it's an appropriate thing to do? Because some people believe that if they pad up their skills, they can just quickly go learn what that skill is in anticipation of an interview. Do you think it's the right thing to do?
Nah, don't do it. Don't do it. Like, don't do it for a bunch of different reasons. It feels dishonest and icky, right? If we're kind of making up credentials that we don't have. And I think that any credible employer that's really interested in that technical skill or whatever it is going to interview you, and you're going to get backed into a corner. I've been in that interview before where I'm talking to someone about like a specific analytic or something, and they can't engage in the discussion. It's like, you don't really have that skill set. And that's going to get you screened out faster from the get-go. So it's like, kind of like a false positive. If you land the interview, but you can't talk the talk, you're going to get screened out anyways. So it was just a huge waste of your time. So I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it in the first place. You want to be honest on your resume. And the other piece that I think is really, really key when it comes to writing your resume is inserting numbers whenever possible, whenever you can quantify something. So yeah, it's not always possible to show you that I can help you with your career. Maybe this is what I'm doing now. Maybe it's not always possible to show that you're a good accountant. So you are sometimes going to have to tell. But the most compelling way to tell that is by using numbers and data and performance indicators that you were responsible for in your career. So include specifics in terms of what you accomplished in that role and around the performance indicators. So the person hiring you can get an overall sense of what you've accomplished and what you're capable of.
Okay, so there's this question here. Is it easy to apply from abroad? Also, my career spans 20 years. How will I fit all this in 1 or 2 page resume for someone whose work experience is more than 20 years?
For 20 years, I'm sorry, edit some stuff out. You got to do it. But remember, your resume doesn't have to show all your experience. What I would do if I were you, with 20 years of experience, I would edit back, obviously, some of my older jobs. Like, so I was a cashier at a grocery store. That's not relevant anymore to my career path. So what do you have like an old experience that's not relevant? And if you're still really stuck, go get the job description that you're applying for. And if you have experience on your resume that doesn't relate to that job description, start deleting the stuff that you can't match from your resume to the job description. Okay, so use that as your initial guise to start screening stuff out. And then as far as when it comes to like applying from abroad, I think that I think absolutely you can apply from abroad, and I think that right now, though, it's exceptionally challenging to secure roles that would require a Canadian presence if you're away. I also think that there are factors. Something as simple as a phone number could make a Canadian employer They might not know how to dial your phone number. So I would say whatever you can do to get that fair consideration, make it as clear, as easy as possible for that employer to know how to contact you. Do that. I think it's possible, but I think it's more difficult if you're not here and you don't have like a local phone number, honestly.
Okay, so this question, let me try to bring it up here. He was asking, are there other ways of networking with people in Canada apart from LinkedIn?
Yeah, I feel really strongly about LinkedIn for anyone who's in a professional role. LinkedIn is sort of, it's norm and standard for anyone who holds like a professional type position. And it's honestly, like from a Canadian employer perspective, it's a little bit weird when someone doesn't have a LinkedIn profile. So just know that it's kind of, it's a norm and an expectation here. But apart from that, if you don't have that profile or it's something that you're working on, there are other organizations that you might reach out to look for like an opportunity to connect with a mentor, as an example. So in my profession in human resources, there's a Canadian Association of Human Resources. I can connect, I can join that association. I can get a mentor inside that association. And that gives me the inside scoop, okay? Like, are there other associations inside of the HR association that I should explore? And it's amazing once you join an organization like that, what else you can learn. Because it's not only HR, now it's all of a sudden, oh, are you an expert in recruitment? Because there's a group of people that you can join if you're really interested in recruitment. Oh, are you compensation and benefits? You can join this group, right? So I think taking that initial step to get informed on what's going on in your industry and what those organizations are is really, really important, and an alternative to LinkedIn as well.
Okay, so something just came to my mind. I know from where we come from, most Asians, Africans, we don't really have one straight career path. We have so many experiences because the kind of jobs you do, you tend to like have so many roles merged into one role. And then people get confused on which kind of job they are supposed to take when they eventually land Canada, or when they're actually doing a job search. So you find someone who has experience in supply chain management, human resources administration, what else? Logistics, all of these roles. And the person is confused on which career path to follow. And you find the person having so many resumes, with these roles. So what advice would you give such a person with a diverse work experience?
Oh, just give up. No, I'm just joking. Don't give up. Oh, it's done. I think that the most important thing before the resume ever gets written, before you're ever on LinkedIn, is stepping back and saying, like, what is it that I actually want to target? So if you are a professional, I liken this a lot to a marketing campaign, because that's basically what a job search is. It's a marketing campaign. Now, you would never start a marketing campaign without first saying, I'm going to invest this amount of time and money, and like, this is like what I want the outcome to be, right? Like, you can see, you wouldn't run a Facebook ad and be like, I'm just going to run it because it'd be fun. I don't know why I'm running it. I'm just going to run it. No, you would know what you want the desired outcome to be. So before you ever start that resume, before you ever get on LinkedIn or start building the network, building your professional network, I think the most important exercise that you can do is go through an exercise called Finding Career Clarity. Also something that I talk about on my channel. And basically you walk through a process of defining what your career goals are. So I think it's amazing that you have experienced several different fields of work. And I would encourage you to say, at this point in time, this is what I want to target, because that's going to change over time. I even look at my own career. We have life changes that shift our directions. We become mothers or fathers, or we don't want to work for corporate anymore, or whatever the case is. Life changes us and our experiences change us. So use the breadth of those experiences, those diverse experiences, to inform the next step in your career. But in order to be successful in a Canadian or a North American job search for that matter, you're going to need to be able to articulate to the employer what your plan is for your career. So you wanna make sure that you have that interview question nailed as well. So as a first step, you define what you want to do, and then you're in a much better place to align all of your actions to achieve that goal. So typically here, a job search, we wouldn't go out and search for a job in HR, supply chain management, or whatever. We would be focused on one specific type of role. That's not to say that you can't be a supply chain professional this year and an HR professional 2 years from now, but you need to decide this point in time, what does success and happiness look like for me?
Okay, so one more question that comes to mind is the aspect of age, because people who are matured above 40, 45, they have this kind of belief that there might be bias against them because of age and the kind of jobs they look for. Let's say they have very good qualifications from where they are coming from. They have articulated those qualifications on their resume, but they feel that the organization they want or they are targeting might not hire them because of their age. How can someone with someone who is in his midlife, 45, 50, overcome such bias?
Yeah, so I guess one thing I always would encourage a job seeker to do when as the first step, you know what you're targeting. Now you've got a great resume that you put together. A quick check and balance is to go through that resume, and anything on the resume that's going to reveal personal information that's not a relevant input to hiring in Canada should be removed from that resume. Okay. So things to me that I will always counsel people to remove from their resume is like their high school graduation date, because the hiring manager will sit there and go, oh, you graduated when? And they can very easily kind of figure out how old you are, right? So any sort of identifiers like that, I always say try to remove them from your resume so you beat the bias, hopefully in advance, so you don't have to face an additional barrier. But yeah, absolutely. So someone is like, I am the best marketing social media person in the world. I'm in my 40s, and you think I'm cool, and I'm not up to trend because I'm in my 40s, and the 25-year-old's better at it because they have more followers on TikTok. Like, so a scenario like this, yeah, for sure, it can come up. And I think the best service that you can do yourself as a job seeker in that scenario is to demonstrate how current your knowledge is on your resume. So using the marketing example again, I recently did, I'm making this up, a Google AdWords certification. Put that on your resume to show that you're still up and current on the trends. And then the other thing is, because we're being extra sensitive to potentially having those biases up against us in the process, you want to be really, really sure that you speak to your current knowledge in the interview process as well. So instead of talking about the experience you had 10 years ago, which is still relevant and foundational to what you can and will do today, speak more about your more recent work experience that shows you're still up on current trends in your field.
Okay. There's a question here. I just got a Canadian online volunteer job. Is it of any benefit in my resume? I am outside Canada right now.
I think as long as that volunteer job lines up, even a piece of the experience that you're getting from that volunteer job lines up with the position that you are going to be targeting in Canada, it brings huge benefit to your resume, and you want to include it. Again, just keeping on the lines of bias and protecting ourselves from the biases basically of other people that can hurt us in the job search. I would be careful if the volunteer job was or it demonstrates like a religious affiliation or something, and I'd be careful to word the title and organization a little bit more carefully, so that that's not highlighted on my resume. But absolutely, having a Canadian volunteer job, you're going to have some skills that will be a nice transfer to you becoming a full-time employee in the Canadian job market.
Okay, so before I ask this next question, is it okay for someone who has so much managerial experience to water down his experience to an entry level position just to get their foot in the door? Because, some people feel intimidated. That's the truth. A lot of new immigrants, they just have this feeling of being intimidated that they are coming into a new space. They don't want to compete with people who have been here and who have the Canadian experience. So instead, they water down their experiences and just put the simple experiences just to get their feet in the door of a company, and then try to work their way up. Do you think it's a good approach to overcoming bias?
Yeah, I gotta say this though, like your experience and background as a manager or whatever your field of expertise was in your own country is still valuable and is still valid. And I've seen this like over and over again. Newcomers really taking jobs and being underemployed because they don't feel that degree of confidence in the Canadian job market. I want to challenge your thinking on that. And I just want to say, oh my gosh, like some of the newcomers that I've met with have been so impressive in terms of their backgrounds in finance, in terms of people coming from Nigeria with these exceptional marketing and communication skills that have blown my mind. And I've been in the Canadian job market my entire career. I want to challenge your thinking on it and encourage you to give it a good try. That you don't settle for underemployment. I acknowledge that that's not always going to be possible, but I want you to go for it and give it a get-go. Your experience, your education, everything has to be translated into words and language that's going to make sense to a Canadian hiring manager. I think that's of the utmost importance. But I think, first of all, you owe it to yourself to try to get a job that's aligned with your experience, if that's what you want and if that's what's going to make you happy. Now, if you're finding like I can't get that management job because employers aren't feeling great because I haven't worked in the country, for most of my career, then if you have to water down some of your experience to land the interview, I would do it as a last resort, much like Adebayo changing his name to Adam. Last resort, because it's going to impact you in a few different ways. You're basically your initial interaction and first role with an employer is a first moment for them to experience you and your personal brand. And just think about how powerful those first impressions are. Mm-hmm. And like how we often say, it's like, oh, I'll never forget that time I met so-and-so. These first impressions stick in our minds. So I'd hate for you to water down your experience, take a job that's not aligned with all the greatness that you have to offer, and then work the next 5 years trying to get the money and the brand that's aligned with the value that you truly bring. As a last resort, try it, but remember, you've got value and experience. Find the employer that's going to recognize that.
Okay, so let me pick this question. Do you address the cover letter to the hiring manager? Is it more prudent to research the person and include his or her name for an added personal touch?
Oh yeah, I love that. If you can and you can stalk people on LinkedIn and find out most things about who the hiring manager is and so on. If it's at all possible for you to address the cover letter to a specific person, yes, absolutely do that. If it's not possible, dear hiring manager is an okay salutation. It's not ideal because you want to add the personal element.
Okay, so let me take this question as well. How can you show that foreign experience is in line with a Canadian job experience?
I think the most important thing, I think often people feel like there's no starting point, right? It's like, here I am, I'm applying for jobs. and there's nothing to keep us grounded. I think a really great starting point to aligning your international experience with Canadian job experience is the job description. It's going to be your tool to kind of hack what you should and shouldn't do every single time. So I want you, if you're struggling to articulate your experience in terms of the Canadian job market, go to job postings. Sometimes you're swapping out words because we might call something different here than you might in your own country. So I'd encourage you to look at a job posting and again, start that exercise of matching up like what's on your resume with what's in the job description. And that to me, that's how you translate your experience into words, job titles and skills that are going to speak to a hiring manager. Because that's a big barrier you're up against, right? It's like you have norms for your country, but the hiring manager here is looking for a different skill, but you're talking about the same skill, but you're calling it something different. Use the job description as a way to sort of hack that process and articulate international experience in words that are going to make sense in the Canadian job market, because they will translate.
Okay. So this question, what are the ways to minimize risk of misuse? That word is long there. My tongue ties most times when I pronounce this kind of words. Misogynistic bias. Yeah. Did I get it right? I hope.
So, and we're talking about bias against women in this case. I think that's what I'm going to go with that assumption. I'm assuming that we're talking about biases against women in this market. Yeah, for sure. It's a thing here as well. And I think, along the name example, so I once had a Canadian client whose name was Samantha, and she changed her name to Sam on her resume and got more interviews. So, I mean, that's one way to sort of hack the system. But I think really coming out in a way that's, again, using those practices around your resume, not using identifiers that are going to give away personal information. I think as a woman, once you land that interview, that's really the critical point.
Okay.
And for someone who's worked in male-dominated industries her entire career, one thing that I've learned along my path, again, I'm not saying this is right or fair, in the interview process in particular, is to really demonstrate my commitment and capability without using, speaking to things like my family and personal life. I've put them in really distinct compartments when it came to surviving in that sort of corporate world, and that fared me pretty well. Again, there's a whole discussion we can have about that, but that's how I sort of debunk that system, and that's where I've seen clients have success through it as well. In Canada, it's important to know. It's so important to know that you have basic human rights, and one of those basic human rights in this country is that you are not discriminated against based on your gender, your age, your sex, your skin color, right? So when it comes to the recruitment process, it is in fact illegal for an employer to ask you specific questions like, oh, are you married? How many kids do you have? Are you having more? Are you going to take a maternity leave? Because in this market, maternity leaves are really long, and they're kind of an issue for some employers, right? So just know it's not right or fair for an employer to ask you questions like that are going to share personal, revealing information. In the workforce here, that is your private information, and the only input to whether or not you get that job should be whether or not you are the most qualified candidate for that job. You should be if you were 9 months pregnant going for that job interview and you were the most qualified candidate, you should still get that job in Canada.
Well, do you think that's really possible? Because I know some people shy away from going for interviews when they are fully advanced in their pregnancy stage. They shy away from going for interviews because they feel, well, it's a personal thing. They feel that the employers will say, oh, we don't think we'll be able to hire this person because of the person might not just spend more time with us, and then the person goes on maternity leave and all that. So how would someone like that overcome such a bias?
Yeah, so and you never know. Like, that's like what the challenge is. Like you never know. Like I've been behind closed doors where hiring managers have absolutely made a decision to screen out a candidate because like, oh, she's 6 months pregnant, so she's going to be gone in 3 months. And in Canada, your maternity leave, you're out of work potentially from 12 to 18 months, right? So long leave. That's a business impact to the manager. So, but with all that being said, for large companies in particular, they have the resources and the money to backfill positions. So in an ideal state, and again, I'm not saying that this is actually how it happens, a woman full term in her pregnancy, if she's the best candidate for the job, should be hired into that job and then sent out on her mat leave, and a replacement should be backfilled. She still has equal right and should be given equal and fair consideration. A pregnancy, having little babies, or being of childbearing years or whatever should have zero bearing and zero input in the hiring decision, and it shouldn't even be part of the conversation in the hiring process.
Okay. So I'll take this question and then one more question. So we have 5 minutes to wrap up. We've been talking for almost 1 hour and it's been interesting. The truth is, it's really been interesting. I feel like we could go on and on and on, but of course, we have other things that we are going to do. So I'll just take this question. Most Canadian employers use ATS to sift through their resumes, I presume. Correct me if I'm wrong. He wants us to discuss this.
Sure. So an ATS is an applicant tracking system. So it's basically like a robot that says, oh, your resume meets, 50% of the keywords, and that's an acceptable ratio. So we're going to move you to the interview process. Applicant tracking systems are absolutely a thing here. It's really, really going to depend on the size and complexity of the employer, the volume of recruitment that they're doing, as well as the company's own values and beliefs around applicant tracking systems. So I can speak to my experience. I did recruitment for a large company. We had an applicant tracking system. The whole HR team hated it, so we didn't use it. So sometimes it's there and it's not fully utilized. We still did a lot of manual screening. Applicant tracking systems are something that you do need to be aware of. The best way to show up through an applicant tracking system it's like a robot doing the initial pre-screening, is to make sure, again, those keywords from the job description are matched up to your resume, because that's often what the decision point is for that robot, whether or not you get through to the next part of the process rather. So I would say make sure that you are translating that experience to terms and language that particular Canadian employer is using in order to maximize your odds of getting through the applicant tracking systems. The applicant tracking systems are not like a universal truth or a universal practice here. They're controversial by times, and I know like there are members of the HR community here who think they're complete nonsense for a bunch of different reasons. But then there are organizations who do really large volume recruitment, and this is a really important tool in their screening process. So there's no universal truth about it. Could be there. Plan for it by including keywords on your resumes, or you might not be subjected to it at all.
Okay, so it's also possible for someone to bypass the ATS if they have done their networking properly. So probably if they've networked through LinkedIn, and then the organization of the company, the organization where the person works in has an ATS system. But of course, if you've networked through LinkedIn, the person can just put in your resume without even filtering the resumes through the ATS. I think that's another way of bypassing the ATS system and getting the resume being seen by the recruiter directly instead of going through the ATS. So one more question, and then we'll wrap up. This question: if your first degree is in no way related to your job experience, example, agriculture first degree, but being in the telecommunication for over 10 years, how easy can I get a job?
It's really all about how you frame up that story, isn't it? I think that you want to include that degree on your resume. A lot of employers just want to see that you've got an undergraduate degree or you have some post-secondary experience. That often is a checkbox for a professional type role. But like, let's be realistic about it. We get our degrees when we're in our early 20s. And again, life changes. We change. Our path changed. Maybe we hate agriculture. Who knows, like what has happened along the path. But I think the most important thing for you to become comfortable with, and what the key thing you need to know going into an interview process is what were the takeaways from that degree that are going to contribute to your success in this position that you're now targeting. Because I don't believe for a second, I think any degree program that we go through, we have lessons learned outside of that classroom context and environment that's largely applicable to almost any job or future life experience. So it's your job to weed out those experiences and build a story and narrative around that can make sense, and really sell the value of the degree and the journey to the employer. You might also even consider like calling it out in the about section of your LinkedIn profile. Like there's some people who have really, really prominent personal brands who will talk out about their journey. Like Jenna Kutcher's one that comes to mind. I can't remember, but she was a photographer or whatever. So she'll talk about, this was the career path I planned. I went on Craigslist. I bought this camera and now I do all these courses or whatever. So she tells this nice story about it. And that connects me with you too, right? Like it humanizes you. So imagine reading that story on your LinkedIn profile. You're all of a sudden not just this nameless person who, why did she do the agriculture degree? I understand your story and I can kind of relate to that. I was forced into this situation to decide my major when I was 20 years old. Yeah. And I went through the degree program. I learned these really great, amazing things. And then I decided the field of work wasn't it for me. And you can talk about it with me and know those speaking points from an about section on LinkedIn, bring those to the interview and be really crisp and clear on kind of like what are the three key points to that story.
Okay. So there's one more question that's quite interesting, and I just want to take this question before we wrap up. Hope you don't mind. Okay, so this person is saying, is English evaluation required for academic job, and can anyone with PhD in Africa be employed in a Canadian university?
I think that is English evaluation required for academic jobs, and can anyone with a PhD in Africa be employed in a Canadian university? I don't know the full answer to that. I do know that you in order to be employed at a university here, you would have to complete some English language testing to be certified in your proficiencies. That I do know for sure. Without knowing kind of like the details of the degree and whether or not the content and context of that degree would be transferable, it's really difficult to say. I would recommend as kind of first steps to unpack that question would be to get in touch with, hopefully you have a network, with building with someone in your network. And they can probably connect you with the right authorities in terms of in terms of whether or not the credential is valid. I want to say it's going to depend, because there's some fields that require licensing and there's legal requirements here that might be different from your country. So without knowing the full context of that degree, I don't really know. But that's how I would start to figure it out. I'd reach out to someone in my network in Canada and say, what organization should I get in touch with to understand if my degree qualifies?
Okay, I think that brings us to the end of today's session. I want to say a very big thank you to you, Shauna, for demystifying all of these things and the biases people face and how they can overcome these biases. I'm so grateful that you are part of this. And for people who want to get in touch with Shauna, please check the description box of the video. You'll find her details. You'll find her YouTube channel. Yes, please, everybody go subscribe to Shauna's YouTube channel. If you want more on career strategy, how to overcome bias, job search, resume, everything about Canada, anything, just connect with her. Subscribe to her channel, connect with her on LinkedIn as well. And then, yeah, you can start building your network. You can start building your network with Shauna right from today. So please don't hesitate to do that. Shauna, do you have any last words for everyone?
I just want to say thanks so much for having me on your channel, and thanks to everyone who's asked like these really great, meaningful questions. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with all of you, and I just know you're going to be successful in your career. So I wish you all the best with your transition to Canada, and all the best for future career success.
Thank you so much. And this brings me to the end of today's broadcast. Hope to see you and bring you more on this channel to talk about more other things about career and anything people have, any question, like more questions concerning the career in Canada. I think I'll be inviting you more on this channel. Thank you so much, Shauna.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Have a beautiful day. Okay.